Welcome to Take Your Medicine podcast. I'm Phil Cowley. I'm been a pharmacist for 25 years. I'm almost 50, and it took me forever to learn. The more you listen to people, the smarter you get. And that everybody has such important things to say. And today, one of those people is somebody who I love, love, love on Instagram, Susan Hyde. And I'm going to let her know, what is your handle on Instagram so everybody knows?
Sure. Yeah, it's Confident Mom, just at Confident Mom.
So I steal content from her all the time. She has an idea and I just take it and make it my own. She's one of those accounts I go to find great ideas. So Confident Mom, just Confident Mom, right? Nothing else.
Yep.
Is
Yep,
an
that's it.
excellent account. She pops up all the time because I watch all of her stuff. Susan is just a darling, brilliant person. She has decided to make being a homemaker the coolest thing ever, which is so awesome. It's not, you can stay home and you can be a stay-at-home mom, and that can be your choice. Becoming a homemaker is so awesome, and she's done just a wonderful job. Susan, thank you so much for taking the
Oh,
time.
well, those are some kind words. Thank you. Yes, of course. Yes.
So I want to jump right into it. I want to jump into the very lowest point. So you and I have something in common. We both have taken antidepressants in the past, and we've also found that a lot of the things that we decided helped us move from that to a new place. And there's a lot of people who can't ever get off all of their antidepressants. So we're going to put a caveat at the beginning of this. None of this
Right.
is supposed to take the place of your doctor, your pharmacist, your nurse practitioner, whoever it is. What this is ideas that we found and things that we wish we would have known earlier. So I took it for quite a while, and I got to be honest, I leaned a lot into 2020, pushed me into that situation.
Right.
But your story starts a little bit earlier than mine does.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is interesting because I think for many years I wanted to get off. I think anybody that starts an antidepressant or, an anti-anxiety medication, anything like that, the goal is to get off. It's kind of a stigma that is associated, right? And so for 16 years, I took medication, and I would say every year to year and a half, I would try to get myself off of it, and the things would come crashing down. So that wasn't part of my story at that time. And it was, I think, built more depressive episodes for me because of that too. So, but what really was the catapult for me was back in 2010. I was diagnosed with cutaneous lupus and systemic lupus. So cutaneous lupus is where you have lesions on your skin. I had them all over my face. And then systemic is just running through your body. And so through the process of meeting with a dermatologist to try to get my skin under control, he had dug and did a little research and said, hey, we really need to get you off of this antidepressant. I did some research, and there are people that once they get off of the antidepressant that you're on, they don't have lupus symptoms. So it was kind of like one of the side effects was giving these appearances of lupus. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I've tried many times before to get off of antidepressants. And so that was really scary. But I knew, like, if I was going to try to heal my body, that I had to figure out what this looked like. And so that opened the door to kind of a whole new chapter for me, just because I dug into, okay, if this is a step I'm going to take, right, to wean myself off of this medication, with my doctor's help, what other things can I bring in, right? We talk always about having to remove something, but if you can bring in some other things to help your body, your emotions to kind of cope through that process, you have a lot better success. And so that was kind of my introduction to using essential oils, and then also just really diving into knowing how much self-care is and having a really supportive community around you. All of those pieces are so important.
Well, it's interesting with antidepressants because generally speaking, we look at an antidepressant and what it does. And like I said, I've taken it, and there's lots of people who I would say don't come off of it. But it usually is a masking effect of something that's underlying. That's something that we don't
Yes.
always talk about. If you take sertraline, if you take citalopram, if you take duloxetine, you take all these things, we know that there's a problem, and we give you the medication in order for you to start to cope with whatever it is. they really are never meant to be the cure. There's never been a pill we give somebody who it takes mood disorders, anxiety, depression, any of those things, and we give you a pill and that becomes the cure. But rather, it's always been how do we stop the bleeding from happening right now?
Yeah, that is so true, right? It is meant to be kind of like you're in the valley, right? And just like, let's get you started up the hill, right? And that's what it is. But then
Right.
I feel like, yeah, then it's just a continuous thing that, I mean, I don't think there's probably something like addiction to it, but we get used to, in my experience, and just from what I had, I felt like I got used to not having to have some of this in my life. Like we forget this is normal, right?
Right.
And so when we're using something for a long period of time and we don't get the normal fluctuations with life and learning how to handle all of that, we just kind of are going along with this. And that's kind of when I removed myself from that medication, I felt like I took off my sunglasses and I was able to experience more joy. I was able to do and see things that I felt like my blinders were on a little bit, you know?
Yeah, they just announced this new drug that's coming out. They've tested it like 4 times. They finally started to get it to where it's got a name now. And you take a pill and it's equivalent to running a 5K. So you take a pill and it's like you just ran it. And I thought to myself, this is a lot like what we do with everything in the pharmaceutical industry. We think that if you take a pill, it will get rid of all the hardship. Like, honestly, I'm a runner. I love running. That first 3 miles, I hate it every single time.
Right.
I
Me
love the
too,
back.
right?
I love the back half, but that first 3 miles, I swear it gets worse every single time. And I think to myself, if I didn't go through the pain, and I'm not, again, I want to be really sensitive. So anybody out there who's really struggling, I want you to know that if I was there, I would give you a huge seven
Yeah.
second hug because I have been that person who slumped on the ground and it was not time for me to come off medications. But
Yeah.
I did find that when I didn't do the work with the medications I'm on, the outcome always is worse on the backside because then I still have to do the work, but now I have to wean myself off of medication and do the work. So if you are on medications, I hope you have a therapist. I hope you're making lifestyle changes as much as you possibly
Yeah.
can and know that we all want to give you a huge hug. But just like that pill that says, okay, now you can take a pill and it'll be equivalent to, I think it won't be equivalent to. If you take Ozempic, you lose weight, but it's not equivalent to building lean muscle to replace that. And there are
Right.
places for all of these medications. I just don't like it when they're marketed in such a manner of here's 15 minutes in the doctor's office, here's your pill. We'll see you in 2 years, you're all better because all better takes so much work, which is what you're
Oh,
good at, is the work end of it. I watch you and you're so good at the work.
well, it is being intentional and learning, right? How the body truly wants to heal itself. And so, we have all of these things coming at us from the outside, right? And we can talk about lifestyle things, which I think are so huge. And there's a problem when you go into the doctor's office and they never ask you some of these questions like, what do you do for exercise? Do you get outside daily? What kind of community do you have? They don't ask you any of those questions. They just ask you a couple things and then, okay, where's your nearest pharmacy? And they're just ready to prescribe something. And I think that if we can get out of that hamster wheel approach, there's just so much to be empowered. Like for me, when you just said, there were times I was slumped on the floor during those 16 years when I took that medication. Like even being on the medication, I don't know that it really solved a lot for me. I was able to manage, but there was a period of time after I had gotten married, I felt my husband, I mean, like I couldn't get out of bed for literally 4 days. And he was like, what is even happening here? And it was the low of the low. And so I'm just grateful through that process and learning, getting off the medication, learning some other things about lifestyle and being the sun is such a gift to us. And I mean, I just recently learned how amazing morning sun for not only your gut and your health there, but for your mental health and what it can do to help with anxiety and depression is literally amazing, you guys. And it's free.
Well,
I'm like, it's like, ah.
it's so cool because infrared light's getting all of this attention and press, and
Right,
we know all
right.
these things about infrared light. What we don't realize is that walking out into the sun, you get infrared light. So you can buy the cool machine, and there
Right.
are, with the UV rays and protection, there's all this stuff. But we learned all of that stuff because the sun was giving us infrared. And from way back genetics that's so old, our mitochondria genetics that we have in there, it actually can utilize infrared light, which tells us, like a plant, when we
Yeah.
go outside, there has been and is infrared light that does things like creates more energy.
Yes.
But we have to make everything so complicated. We have to now get a machine or a vest that gives
Yes.
us those. We have no longer, if we can't market it and put it on them and make some money off of it and do, it's like it's no good anymore. And it's cool that people are now starting to look at, wait, if we just took out some of all that extra we have and just start doing
Right.
what we used to do, what would happen?
Right. What would happen? I mean, it's true. I think if we just sat and thought about even 40 years ago, people were not as sick as we are now. That's a given. Like, if you can't see that, then I'm not sure what to say. But the food that we eat, the amount of time we're inside, the amount of time we're on screens, all of these things impact our body in a negative way. So instead of spending more money, right, for all of the fancy things, let's just go back to do some of the things that, maybe 40 years ago or 50 years ago we were doing, which was we were outside so much more. I mean, it's crazy. So part of my story is our family sold our home during COVID and bought an Airstream and traveled the country during COVID.
Wow.
So very, tight living quarters. But one of the things that I miss so much during that time that we were traveling is we spent so much time outside because we were in a little tin can, right?
Right.
But we chose that lifestyle. But then in the evening, we went out, we would make a fire often, I mean, these are the things. It sounds so Laura Ingalls, old fashioned, but these are the things, friends, that really bring contentment and joy in our life. Sitting here scrolling this for 2 or 3 hours before we go to bed, that is a recipe for disaster. And I even catch myself getting caught up in that, right? And I have to be very intentional to stop the phone thing, especially 1 or 2 hours before I go to bed. So anyway, we're getting on a little rabbit trail, but I mean, all of these lifestyle choices, are so critical, and really nourishing your body with good food. I know we were talking before we jumped on about, going on a road trip and eating some crappy food and it feels good. It's great, right? I
Right.
want the big cinnamon roll when I go out for breakfast, and that's okay, right? I'm the 80/20 gal. But for that 80% of the time, really being intentional to choose foods that don't have a bunch of ingredients that you can't read, that are real quality foods that are really going to nurture and feed your body. I think when I came off of those antidepressants and then began really understanding how my body works, what were the next steps now? Okay, I have this lupus diagnosis and I'm Googling, like, what could my life be like
Right.
if, that was my story? And I'm like, no, I don't want that. My mom had passed away from multiple sclerosis. So I'm like, no, I don't want that. And so it was intentionally giving up gluten. I remember I thought that was the be all end all. I was like, how in the world could I do that? But it was a choice and I did it and I survived, right? And then looking at, my body's lacking in minerals. How can I get that? What is it that I can do to help my body function in a way that it was meant to function? You are like the professional in that. I love you have so many amazing tips, and it really does make a difference. And I think what can happen sometimes is people get a scale, right? Where they get an idea, but then they begin to feel so overwhelmed that then you do nothing.
Right.
And that's my approach when I talk to people on my Instagram, is like, with regard to homemaking, women can get so overwhelmed so easy, but let's just stop the train and pick 1 or 2 habits to start implementing. It's like, once you get that going, right? Okay, and you've got those down, add one more. And so I think if we use that approach with all of the areas in our life, we would have way better success for sure.
Well, it's really interesting too, because when you make one change, people think, well, how do I continue to juggle? That's one thing you talk about, with a lot of people talk about, is I make one change, that ball's up in the air. Now I got to keep that one up. How do I keep another one? Food is one of those really interesting. Food and what we put on and what we use is one of those super interesting things to me, because we start to look at changes in microbiome or inside of our body with the bacteria. If you start eating 80% of the time right, or 40%, you'll start finding that things that used to not make you sick when you eat them will now make you sick to your stomach. And that's because you've changed the bacteria. The bacteria got used to lots of protein. They got used to clean whole foods. Now that French fry that you thought was so good, you'll start getting a negative response. And it's really funny because people are like, well, how do I get from eating Taco Bell every day? And then you watch these people who are always clean. You're like, whatever, you're just a crunchy. They don't realize making small changes will make you crunchy. Like, you better be careful. When you cut out processed foods for a week, you'll go back to them and you'll get really sick because you've
Yeah.
changed the bacteria, and the bacteria won't know what to do with it. So it'll let a lot of that grease go through you. And when it hits that large intestine, it's no longer yours. That thing is, you're running to the bathroom at that point. And so a lot of these small changes, the nice thing about making changes that are for good, whether it's as a mother, as a person, or when it comes to your health, once you've made that change, when you slip back, you will get a negative reinforcement that you can't go back there because it makes you feel bad. And I found that personally with my antidepressant, is that I had things in my life that I made changes. I started exercising regularly. I cut out a lot of the brominated sugars and things like that we have, because that's one thing that really concerns me, is like, inside Mountain Dew, you've got those hydrogenated bromide
Yeah.
substances. And I started getting really worried about some of those. And when I went back to them, I found that my mood automatically took a dive. And so it was easier for me to make those changes once I had seen I was bad, I got good, and I'm like, oh, if I go back there, I'm going
Yeah.
back to the way it was.
Right. Yeah. You have those experiences that, yeah, like you just said, it solidifies that making these positive changes truly is what your body's craving. It's just like, the other night staying up late to watch the election results. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my body operates best when I have 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep. And here I am. I knew the next morning I was going to regret it. And it's the same thing when I eat something. I know I'm going to regret this because, yeah, my body rebels because it's like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? This is not the norm, and we don't know what to do with this. And so, yeah, it really backfires for sure.
You've got a family where you brought some in from a marriage before, and then
Yeah,
you've got adoptions as well, right? And then
yeah.
and your husband now, he had a child as well, right? So you kind of
Yes.
like,
So, yeah. So I'm a
you're all
stepmom, bio
Smiths.
mom, foster, adoptive mom. Yeah, we got going on.
And when you talk about things like we have inside of health, where we're talking about making small changes and 80-20%, that kind of fits over to the whole being a homemaker, or being a father, or being a mother, and all those things as well. What do you think that you've learned through your health journey have you been able to utilize inside motherhood that's made you a better mom? Life has never moved faster than it does right now. Can you imagine a time where everything happens in 15 to 90-second increments? No wonder our brains are overtaxed, and there's no wonder why everybody's looking for a solution to that. When I look for solutions for cognition to keep up with brain health, I always think acetylcholine before I think stimulants. More caffeine usually doesn't solve any of the problems. Avantera has Elevate. Now, in Elevate, they have specifically designed it to help with focus, memory, and learning rather than just more stimulant. So AvanteraHealth.com, put in Take Your Medicine as the code, save some money. This product has been amazing to me. The focus was there without all the jittery. AvanteraHealth.com, Take Your Medicine as the code. I love this stuff.
Oh, that's a really good question. Somebody asked me the other day if there was one thing I could go back to, like my 30-year-old self and remind myself or tell myself, it was
Buy
kind of like,
Bitcoin, right? Buy
yeah.
Bitcoin is what you told
Yeah.
yourself. But
Besides
beyond
that,
that,
but really it is like just having more compassion and grace with myself. So I'm an Enneagram 1, massive perfectionist. And if I do anything, I want to do it 110%. But man, that's a lot of pressure to carry, right? And so even, in parenting, blending a family, going through the adoption whole thing, in homemaking, all of that, right? If we just had more compassion with ourselves, I wonder what it would look like. And so I've made so many mistakes in so many areas of my life, whether it's in parenting or in my marriage, or I mean, all of that, right? And I think when we just can acknowledge that and be okay with knowing that that's okay, we just have a lot of really high expectations on ourselves. So I love that 80/20. I'm going to go back to that for all of areas of my life for sure. But even in homemaking, I'm sitting here sharing tips on how to keep your home tidy and, cook meals at home and all of these things. And the last 2 weeks, things were crazy here and I really didn't clean my house at all. And when I shared that on Instagram, people were like, "Oh, I feel so much better." And
Right.
it's like, "Oh, yeah, I share the real because if you're going to be in that space on Instagram where people are looking to you for tips and advice, you can't show up always with that's not real. That's not life, right? I'm going to show up to be authentic. And so, yeah, I mess up a lot, but you know what? We can pull the bootstraps up and move ahead. So,
Absolutely. Well, and there's another thing that people don't realize is that when we put too much pressure on ourselves, you always have a release valve person, somebody who always catches it. And it's usually the person who you love or trust the most.
right. They're your closest to, right? Yeah.
And so when you see a child and they're like, so my wife and our youngest, he's always unloading on her and he never unloads on me. And she's
Uh,
like, why is it so easy for you and so hard for me? I'm like, it's because he loves you more. Like he's tighter. He
mm,
trusts you more. And he's like, and then she says, I wish it wasn't that way. But it does make me look like inside. I said, who do I release on? And my spouse quite often is the one that receives, like, I'll get a bunch of garbage from people who I don't care and I'll load it up. And then I release it by being short with her. So I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. Do
yeah.
you have a release person?
Yeah, well, I would say it's my husband for sure. Yeah. The one person that is the most supportive of me. I know that he will love me no matter what. And so, yeah. And you know what? We all need those people in our life, right? We need those people that will sit and listen to us, even when maybe we don't deliver the message as kindly as we could, for sure. But then there again, I know if I'm short with my husband or I'm snappy,
Mhm.
sometimes he'll call me out and be like, you know what, that didn't feel very good. And I'm appreciative of that. And then it gives me opportunity then, right, to say, you're right. I apologize. That shouldn't, have come out that way because he is. He's a great support and a great listener and encourager. But understanding those kind of boundaries, I think, are good too. And that brings me back to that period of time coming off of medication. And if you don't have safe people that you can bring in to share, because there's a lot of feelings that should start coming out, right? When
Yeah.
you are experiencing weaning off of medication. And I say, whether it's a therapist or it's your partner or some close friends, I mean, those are really good relationships to be able to help you have that support system for sure. So,
Absolutely. And there's two things I want to. First thing is that I always look at myself and I say, when I put too much pressure on myself, it's going to hurt my relationship with the person that means the most to me. And so taking care of yourself is taking care of the relationships around you that really mean something to you.
that's
And so
good. Yeah.
and so I love the fact that when everybody starts recognizing who their release person is, they start realizing that if I don't start changing what I'm doing, I'm hurting the person I love the most. I need to fix me so we can fix us. But I
Yeah.
also like when you start talking about medications and where we go with medications and how you have to have that person that you really trust and how it's this whole process that's in place. It is an important thing for people to have there before
Yeah.
they even start to try to get rid of those things.
Oh, totally. Yes. Oh my gosh.
And because if not, then you'll end up you will fail quite often on every time you try to come off medications. You need to start identifying who that person is and really let them know. Like I pre-apologize a little bit to them, like I'm going to be kind of a mess for the next little bit. I need you there, and talk to your doctor saying, now I've got a support network. And you talk a lot about community. And we were
Right.
talking before about how social media, now we both make money off of social media. It's part of our living. But today in Australia, they announced that they were going to ban social media for the under the age of 16. And there was part of me that was kind of like glad
Yeah.
because
I hadn't heard that because I'm like, oh, I think that might be good, but
because I really love social media, but I also have an ability to know when I'm sitting on the couch and I know that I'm in a negative cycle and I know I'm hiding from the world and I'm scrolling, I know better. I'm not so sure that my 13-year-old, 14-year-old knows better. And when you make decisions on your own, because I do believe so much in freedom, there's a lot to do with knowing better versus not knowing better. And the same thing happens in healthcare. So
Yes.
when you went into those doctors the first time, you presented with lupus irregularly. You didn't have a positive ANA, so you kind of got rushed out.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody would listen to me. And it was so frustrating because I had all of these symptoms. And so I went to several doctors and finally, and this is where, one of the things that I love to do, no matter what area people are talking about, is I really want people to feel empowered. I want them to listen to their own intuition because your body knows. And for me, to keep going to doctors and they would not give me an answer that I was happy with, I kept pushing in. I kept fighting, not only for me, but for my family. I mean, at that point in my life, we had this little boy in our care that was 3 years old when we were hoping to adopt him. And I'm like, I don't want to be sick for the rest of my life with this little boy, not even with my older kids. But so I just kept pushing and I'm like, okay, next step, none of these people know what to do. I'm going to the university hospital. I'm going to students. And that actually was where the door opened for me because I pushed and pushed. And quite honestly, I got the most help from teaching hospitals because this is kind of a broad statement, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying is doctors that have been in their specialty for, 15, 20, 25 years, I'm not quite sure how much they're doing for continuing education. And so when I ran into that doctor that was trying to help me with my faith, that was at a teaching hospital, and he had done a little more research than maybe a doctor that would have been in there, 20, 25 years that wouldn't have spent the time. And the same thing happened when I was really trying to get some help for the systemic part. Like we got the face cleared up, but what's the next step? And so that I just want to empower people to know, keep pushing, find another doctor, find another doctor. If you don't have somebody that you feel is on your team, move on, find
Right.
somebody else. And that was the beauty. I finally found this doctor that gave me that diagnosis. Okay, great. Now we can move forward to try to look at what will heal. And it was great because he would listen to my crazy ideas that I would come in. Hey, I read this about blah, blah, blah. I want to start weaning off of this medication and whatever. And you want a doctor that is going to be willing to meet you halfway and not just be like, if you're not going to fully listen to me, like you're fired, I don't
Right.
want you as a patient. And so just know that there are doctors that are willing to work with you, not just be telling you exactly what to do. So
Well, and part of it, I mean, I love all of that. And it's really important to say every doctor, the doctor you went to that you disliked, somebody else is going to go to, and they're going to be the very best doctor for
yeah,
them. What we end up getting inside of life is people that have common experience, common knowledge. So I didn't understand croup for kids. I always thought it was just not a big deal. And then my Zeke was 2, and we were at a cabin, and I didn't have anything to treat him, and I was driving down the canyon. I have never ever felt more attached to a person when they come in and say, I was so scared last night when their kid had croup. And it's only because I lived through it. And so
right,
one thing that when we talk about empowerment, I don't necessarily believe, I mean, there's always bad something or other, but even the doctor you think was terrible, the next person will go in and they'll have a life experience that's the same as the physician, and they will be the most wonderful thing in the world. And
right.
that's important for you to understand as a patient. Maybe your life and their experience don't line up, but the next one down the hall may have like come in and say, my daughter's going through the same thing. Let's get after this. Like I am 100% in. And it's so important to know that you're trying to find it's like the dating game with these doctors. Not it's not an
Yeah.
arranged marriage, it's the dating game. You go into one, you're like, that's a terrible answer, I'm going to go ahead and slip out now. Or the next one, I think I'm going to hook, this is going to be great. And then the doctor, it's that the whole thing is, it's not that you have to. And I think HMOs and formularies have kind of pushed us in the idea that you have to accept the one that's on the list.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. There is definitely freedom to push in and to choose something different than, right, this list of like 4 people. No, these are the only 4 people that will help you or whatever. And to have some freedom and realize that that is not accurate, right? Somebody that's going to be walking you through an experience, whether it's just general healthcare or really trying to tackle some kind of disease that you have, you really want to have somebody that you feel is on your side. And so I love that analogy of the dating game. I love that.
Where would you have been, do you think, if you would have just taken the first, let's say, two doctors and just said, that's where I'm at? Where do you think your life would be at right now if you just said, okay, I guess that's all I have?
I was thinking about this the other day. At the state of where I was with such joint pain, I'm also a runner. I haven't really ran in the last couple of years, but from the time that I started recovering and getting my body back from this lupus diagnosis, I ran 5 half marathons. And so I wouldn't have been running 5 half marathons, because I was in such pain. I couldn't sleep. I was having heart palpitations. I would not be experiencing the vibrant life that I am now. Would never have traveled the country in an Airstream with my family living, woo, just living life. So many opportunities would have been missed because I would have felt so terrible. And so every day I just wake up and I'm so grateful that I did not subscribe to that diagnosis. Like, sorry, we can't help you. There's nothing. No, you don't have this diagnosis or the other. And oh, well, we can give you this medication. I know for a fact I would not be in the place that I am now. And the fact that I had that experience and now can share my experience with so many others, helping them kind of get out of the rat race to feel empowered, that is kind of that thing, right? It makes it all worth it. You don't know what you've experienced until you get to the other side. And then you can kind of see, oh, now I kind of see maybe why that had to happen. So,
Well, and the more that we experience, the more that we're gentle in giving out advice, because we're kind of in this really, we're in an area where half the country's upset today and half this
right.
country's pleased. And I think to myself, I've had people on both sides contact me because I really don't feel strongly about either party, if I'm being really honest. Like I can pick, and I know that bothers people. But when you start talking, the longer you live, the more you realize that each individual out there has potential, and each individual out there are so smart. And so the idea that we get to share, you and I get to share anything with
Yeah.
these individuals. And you're like, okay, somebody will stop at me and say, well, I used your stuff to make my feet quit stinking. And I am so thrilled that it's just so simple on something. Cause I'm like, I
Sure.
did something, like I go home, like somebody gave me like first prize. Like I did something good today. Look, I did something good. And I
Yeah.
think that that feeling that we have is so important for us to share with
Yeah.
every, especially our own children. Our own children should be able to lash out at us and then get praise because of the littlest things they do that you want them to keep going on. And I think that in the world that we're in right now, that is an essential trait that we have to really push out there, is
Yeah.
treating people in a way that they know they're smart and they can do it. So I love that you were like, okay, well, this was a bad answer. I'm not going to go home, sit on the couch, get arthritic, have the weight. Now I'm going to have inflammatory bowel issues and have this whole
Right.
list.
Yeah.
You're like, there's got to be more. And that takes a lot of oomph. Where do you think you found a lot of that oomph there to
Yeah,
keep going?
it definitely did. I think part of it is kind of just my personality and my drive, but seeing my mom suffer with multiple sclerosis for over 20 years before she passed away, like I saw what that life could be like. And so I knew I was rejecting that. That was not going to be my story. And there were a lot of hard things that come when you choose to do things differently. I think too, along with coming off of antidepressants, having people around you that can encourage you when things get challenging, because it wasn't a breeze. It wasn't like, oh, well, this just happened. I mean, you make all these changes, or, there was a lot that happened during the 2.5 years that I changed a lot of things to help my body restore itself and come back to life. And it was funny. I was just this morning, had made a video on the day that I went to break up with my rheumatologist, because I had been seeing him for 2.5 years. Wonderful guy. Like he was my guy. He was my answer. Right. And so we just kept weaning, and then we got off all the medication, and he just kept saying, I want to see you every 6 months. Right. And so finally, it was like after a year, like my blood work all was amazing. And I made this video about, I was in the parking parking lot and I'm going to be like, I'm going in to break up with my rheumatologist today. And I feel so emotional about it. And then I ended up seeing him about 4 years later, and he was ecstatic that I had not had to come back and see him. So I'm grateful that I had the experience. And I think, like I said, just knowing somebody that suffered with another autoimmune issue, and I could see that there, no, I was not going to take that and carry that. So, yeah, sorry, I'm going to get
No,
emotional.
no, it's perfect because that's what we're talking about. See, I wanted to really push in with this one. So we all have experiences and
Yeah.
we all get to gain knowledge, and everybody's knowledge and experience, they don't always match up.
Mm-mm.
And even if somebody, this is like really important. There are people out there like they hear these inspiring, like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm getting rid of all the forever chemicals. I'm getting rid of all the dyes. I'm gonna do all this stuff. And like I still feel awful. And it's really important for the process of that individual to understand that you going through those hardships taught you something that will become useful at some point. Most of my hardest experiences, if you had asked me in the moment, I would have said I'd go back and change it so that auditor wouldn't have come through, or I would have changed something. And now I look back and I'm like, I couldn't have done anything I'm doing now if I hadn't gone through those things.
Right.
So for anybody that's listening that has tried the things and have failed, know that each one of those experiences helped you learn something.
Mhm.
And what I was wondering if you could tell me what was the hardest trial, the hardest experience that you went through that you learned the most from.
Oh,
That is
wow.
so loaded. So you can skip this one if you want, just so you know, because that's a loaded
I can
question.
skip
But
it
I
now.
think, yeah. So that's just, I just wonder if, people, harder it is, the more you learn, I think.
Right. I think that I've had several in my life. I mean, I went through a divorce that was a really challenging period of time. Health issues are always so difficult, because there's just so many unknowns. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I recently decided, oh, it might be time to go see a counselor again. I hadn't seen a counselor for probably over 6 years. And I was like, yeah, I kind of feel like maybe it's time to kind of clean up some of the areas, that I have let sit. And when you see a new therapist or counselor, you get to tell them your whole life story. And as I'm sharing parts of my story, I got really emotional because we all have our story, right? We've all had ups and downs. We've all had things happen. And I think as I took the time to share about my life, I really have had some beating down experiences, but I've always gotten back up. And I
Yeah.
wonder, why is that? Why have I chosen to get back up after being, beaten down, and just really seeing like, wow, I really need to have a little bit more compassion with myself because, yeah, I have overcome a lot of things that would have maybe left somebody else laying down on the ground. So,
Isn't it
yeah.
cool to have a backpack that's so full of experience? So now when
Yeah.
that I've read a
But
lot
that
of
are not negative because, right,
yeah,
we want to carry the backpack around with all this stuff that we don't want to unload, right? Ever.
right.
It's a great to have experiences that help us be better.
That's right.
It's the stuff that we put in our backpack that we just, no, 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 this is going to make it okay for me to act this way or be whatever, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I love
It's
that
the shame,
analogy, but
anything that's
yeah,
got shame, anything that has guilt,
yes,
just get that out of there. But anything that
yeah,
you've learned through hard experiences, like you take those out, like they're these shiny moments, like you take this little thing out, nobody else
yeah.
cares, and you're like, look what I got. When I went through high school, it was like a terrible time for me. I had no friends, and I ended up making two friends, and they're still my friends today.
Oh,
And that story, you take it out of your backpack and you like show it to your kids as this moment of triumph. And age and experience gets that. And as the older you get and the more experience you get, the more you take out that heavy weight that's in the back that doesn't matter. Like, look, no matter what I do, I'm always going to have a high voice that sounds like a girl when I get excited. What am I going to do about it at this age, at 50? You know what I mean? But you start getting away, you're like, I kind of like my voice. It sounds different than everybody else's as you get older.
yeah,
And so important in your health journey to do the same thing because there are things that you can do, things that you cannot do. There's things
right,
that you believe and you listen to your body. You're like, you know what? I know that they say lavender doesn't really do anything. I use lavender. I sleep better. It gets rid of my neuropathy on my feet. I'm using lavender. I don't care what somebody tells me. That's
right.
in my experience backpack. And I love the idea that we're starting to get more and more into a place when you walk into a room and you talk medical, that the term disinformation is being chucked out because what we understand is it's all partial information. The stuff that
Right.
the FDA is giving you is partial. And then
Right.
there's stuff that we don't quite get, but we know there's something there is partial. And now we're starting to look at it saying, okay, look, 2020 taught us not anybody's all the way right and not anybody's all the way wrong. And
Yeah.
now finally I feel like we're making this new move into where we're accepting it all and we're trying to make the perfect gumbo out of it. Magnesium is essential. So why do we have to keep taking it? You'd think by now that our body would have figured out how to hang on to magnesium, but it doesn't. It trades it for everything. It trades it for sodium, it trades it for potassium. And because of it, so many Americans are lacking in magnesium. But the biggest question you always have is, which one do I take? Do I take magnesium threonate, oxalate, citrate? Which one do we want? Well, Bioptimizers Magnesium Breakthrough has fixed this problem. It has some of all of them. So if you're looking for magnesium to help with mood, like depression and anxiety, this is the way to go. If you have problems with sleep, well, they have that one in there too. Muscle cramps, it's there, and regularity. Bioptimizers Magnesium Breakthrough, it's a product that makes it so you cover all the types of magnesium you need. Now, if you go to bioptimizer.com, put in code Take Your Medicine, look at the deals that they have, then you get all your magnesium and you don't have to pay all of the price. Bioptimizer.com.
Right. Yeah. Right. One of the things that I love to do, I don't necessarily share, I share some opinions on my Instagram, but I feel like I have been led to really be like, I want to make people curious. I'm not going to tell you necessarily what to do. I mean, unless you flat out ask me what I would do if I were you. However, I feel like it's my job in that space to make people curious. Like for me, I remember I shared that our family drinks raw milk. We've only drank raw milk for over like 11, 12 years. And it was so foreign to some people. And I'm like telling why we do or whatever, but I wasn't on there saying like, you should only drink raw milk, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
but it made people curious. Why would you only do that? Why have you been doing it for, 12 years? What? And I love opening up conversations like that where it's okay if somebody else doesn't agree or has a very strong opinion the other way, but we have lost this art of even having a conversation in those spaces. And so I feel like that is just one of the things that I love is to just make people a little bit curious.
Well, and how much have I learned personally off of having those conversations? Because I used to take it that I know what I know and I sat through my classes and I have that. And now I look at it, I'm like, okay, what if they're right? That's the first thing I always ask myself when somebody has something. And from that, I've learned like a crazy amount. That's actually why we have this here, is because there were times where I was so wrong. And by learning what they had and then intertwining what I have now, I'm like super brilliant at something that I used to be just uninformed with. And I think that's a great place for everybody to be in and know that the person talking to you has a brilliance within them, just like the brilliance that you bring. And I love that that's how you do it because I'm the same way. Like, I get the raw milk thing. And I also understand why somebody in the middle of downtown Detroit would be concerned about drinking raw milk versus the person who just milked it.
Right.
Those are not the same animals. And having somebody be able to say, you really do that, it's so cool to me. I'm with you 100%. I think it's awesome. I think everything you do is awesome. So tell them again where they can find you because
Oh,
I want to make sure they follow you because I really do steal stuff from her all the time. So now you'll see
oh.
that I take her content and twist it, make it my own a little
Am I
bit.
going to
So
see you wearing an apron, Phil?
I have a few aprons.
There
We're
you
good.
go.
I love to cook. My people don't like watching me cook. I love to cook. Macarons are my favorite. They're so hard to make. So
Oh, I see. I haven't made that. So,
yeah.
well, I'm over on Instagram at Confident Mom. So that's where you'll find me and lots of fun little tips on homemaking and a little bit about my life. And yeah, just a place of encouragement is really the bottom line, is what I love to do. So,
We leave everybody with an idea how to make the world kinder. I always tell everybody after you're done with this, text somebody something kind, give somebody a 7-second hug. How do you suggest that people that are listening can make the world kinder around them?
I would say be curious instead of having an opinion or something to come back when somebody makes a statement to you or something. Be curious. Maybe come back and ask a question. I'd love to know why you feel that way, or tell me more about that. I think, gosh, what would our world be like if those were the conversations that we had?
It will be better. That's what's happening. We're going to make it better. We're going to start asking those questions. I think this is the best time in the world when somebody has a different opinion. You listen to them and find a way to find something that's in common instead of just things that are uncommon. And it's
Right.
happening. I think it's happening. I think the world's going to
Yes,
get kinder. I believe in it.
I think so.
Well,
Yes,
thank
me
you
too.
so much for your time. It's always been wonderful. So, everybody who's listening, this has been Susan Hyde. You want to go find her on The Confident Mom on Instagram for sure. It's been a lovely, lovely conversation. This is Take Your Medicine podcast. Please subscribe, give us a like, send it to somebody else and listen to it. And we'll just keep on making this content for everybody to hear. Thank you so much.